My mother-in-law banned me from the birthday party I planned and paid for, so I canceled the whole thing and threw a private bash without her. She had no idea. I deleted every reservation, recalled every invite, stripped the venue of her favorite decor, and turned it into my own night of joy. While she sat at home waiting for admiration and cake, I popped champagne with people who actually liked me. I know how that sounds, but I need you to hear the whole story before you judge me. Because this wasn't just about a party, it was about being told out loud into my face that after years of trying, I'd never be part of her family. She said it with a smile, like she expected me to nod and thank her. And I almost did. I almost swallowed it like I had 100 other slights. But this time, something inside me cracked. Not with rage, but with clarity. I didn't belong, and I was done pretending. So yes, I canceled her birthday, and no, I don't regret it. If anything, I regret not waking up sooner. I didn't marry into this family thinking it would be easy, but I thought love would be enough. When I met Liam, he was already carrying the weight of a family that leaned on him too much. He was the oldest of four, the quiet, responsible one. His father had passed when he was 21, and his mother, Marie, had never worked a day in her life. His siblings were still in school back then, aimless but protected, while Liam started working 12-hour days to keep everyone afloat. And still, he smiled. That's what I loved about him, the way he bore burdens without bitterness. When we got engaged, I knew his family would be part of the package. I was nervous, sure, but hopeful. I wanted to be the daughter-in-law Marie would eventually call her own, the older sister the twins might confide in, the kind of woman who could cook Sunday dinner and carry on conversation with ease. Our first meeting wasn't terrible, just formal. Marie was polite but distant. She asked where I worked, what my parents did, and whether I went to church. The questions felt like a checklist. I passed barely. Still, I came back every holiday, every awkward dinner, every time Liam said, "Can we swing by my mom's real quick?" I smiled, brought wine, and helped clean up. I even helped pay the overdue electric bill one winter when Liam mentioned it casually over coffee. "It's nothing," I told him. "She's family." I believed that. Even when Marie forgot my birthday 2 years in a row. Even when the twins, Chloe and Kara, never invited me to their graduation parties but posted pictures of Liam with captions like "Best Big Brother Ever." Even when I hosted a Thanksgiving dinner, Marie brought her own casserole because I figured yours might need backup. I laughed it off. I always did. They'll come around, I told myself. You just have to keep showing up. And I did. I showed up for Liam's brother Caleb's 21st birthday with a handmade cake and a gift card, even though he barely grunted a thank you. I went dress shopping with Marie, even when she spent the entire time making passive-aggressive comments about my fashion sense. I helped them move apartments, babysat a cousin's kid during a funeral, and even covered for Chloe once when she backed into someone's car and begged us not to tell Marie. I became the fixer, the helper, the peacemaker, all while they kept me at arm's length. Liam noticed, of course. He'd say, "You don't have to do this," or "Don't go out of your way for them, they won't change." But I believed they could. I believed kindness could melt coldness, that consistency could build trust, that family could be chosen and nurtured, even if it didn't come naturally at first. I didn't grow up with a big family. My parents were quiet people, steady but not social. So maybe I romanticized the chaos of Liam's world. The dinners with too many voices, the last-minute group texts, the drama. It felt alive, messy, but full. I wanted to belong to that mess. I thought if I loved them hard enough, they'd love me back. When Marie's 55th birthday came around, I saw it as a chance, a big, bright opportunity to finally be accepted. I remembered her saying once, half drunk on white wine, that she always wanted a real party, something elegant, something just for me. So I started planning months in advance. I made spreadsheets, called vendors, consulted Liam on every detail. I reached out to the twins and Caleb. "Want to help?" I asked. Chloe left me on red. Kara said, "Sounds exhausting. You have fun." Caleb replied with a thumbs up emoji. Liam looked at me one night and said, "Why are you doing all this?" "Because," I answered, "this could be the moment." He didn't say anything, just kissed my forehead. So I booked the venue, a restaurant Marie had loved back when her husband was alive. I got the exact flowers she liked, the playlist, her favorite lemon meringue cake from a bakery 2 towns over. I made place cards. I planned a toast. I even practiced it in the mirror, hoping my voice wouldn't crack. It was going to be perfect. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the night I stopped being an outsider. Looking back now, the signs were always there. They just didn't scream. They whispered quietly, persistently, until I started to believe the silence was my fault. At first, I thought it was just shyness or maybe cultural gaps. Marie wasn't warm, but she was polite, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. I figured I just had to keep showing up, prove myself, and earn a place at the table. But slowly the cracks showed. One night, Liam and I hosted dinner at our apartment. I went all out, pasta from scratch, garlic knots, his mother's favorite Pinot Grigio. I even set the table with my grandmother's china, lit candles, and played soft jazz. It felt like a grown-up, peaceful evening. Marie showed up 40 minutes late, and she brought her own food. "Oh, I wasn't sure what you'd be serving," she said, breathing past me with a covered Pyrex dish. "Didn't want to risk anything too spicy." She didn't touch my food. Instead, she asked for ice water, not sparkling, because that always upsets my stomach, and spent the evening picking at her casserole in silence. The twins barely looked up from their phones. When they did, it was to ask if we had Wi-Fi. Chloe complained that the room was a little stuffy. Kara asked if we had oat milk. We didn't. Liam tried to fill the awkward gaps, bless him, but it felt like dragging boulders uphill. When they finally left, Mary kissed his cheek and said, "At least you haven't changed." Then she turned to me and gave a smile so thin it might have been a paper cut. It became a pattern. Every event, every invitation, I was either overlooked or endured. I'd bring thoughtful gifts, scarves in winter hues, books I knew they liked, skincare sets I'd handpicked, and I'd get mumbled thanks while they fawned over some cheap candle someone else had brought last minute. When I got promoted, I brought a bottle of good wine to Mary's place, hoping to celebrate with her. She glanced at the label. "I'm more of a red wine person," she said, setting it aside like a forgotten envelope. I tried organizing brunches. They'd say yes, then cancel an hour before, or worse, go quiet entirely, only for me to see Instagram stories of them out together, laughing, clinking glasses, all dressed up, without me. And Liam noticed. "They're not bad people," he'd say. "They just take a while to open up." I nodded, even when I didn't believe it. I didn't want to be the wife who made him choose. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, generous enough, eventually they'd let me in. Instead, they leaned harder on Liam and pushed me further out. Financially, emotionally, it was always him. Rent, tuition, bills, emergencies. He supported them like a second father. I once suggested we draw some limits, and Liam just shook his head. Their family. But I didn't feel like I was part of that family. One Christmas, I gave Marie a framed photo I'd had restored, Liam and his late father, taken when he was just a boy. I even added a brass plate with his dad's name and dates. I thought it would mean something. She opened it, stared, and said, "I think I have this photo already somewhere." Then she moved on to opening a candle from Chloe, apple cinnamon, and raved about how thoughtful it was. I smiled, pretended it didn't sting. But the worst was always the subtle exclusion. Group chats I wasn't part of, family dinners I heard about after the fact, vacations were planned without my knowledge and then posted publicly. Once, they even had matching shirts for a family reunion Liam and I attended. Mine was missing. "Oh," Kara said, "we didn't know if you'd be coming." I stood in that group photo like a stranger who'd photobombed. Still, I kept trying. I baked for their bake sales. I drove Caleb to job interviews. I helped Marie reorganize her kitchen. I remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and even minor appointments. And yet, every time they looked through me, around me, past me, when Mari's 55th birthday approached, I saw it as one last chance. Maybe a grand gesture would finally break through. I texted Chloe about invites. Can't, work's crazy, she replied. I knew her boutique closed at 6. Kara said she wasn't a planner. Caleb sent me a TikTok of someone flipping a table and captioned it, "Me if this party sucked." I laughed. What else could I do? But that night, Liam found me curled on the couch, phone in hand. "You're still doing this?" he asked gently. "I have to," I whispered. "It might be the only thing that changes anything." He looked at me for a long time, sad, tired, loving, then said, "You don't have to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you." But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, because somewhere inside me, a younger version still believed that if I just tried hard enough, I'd finally be enough. The night before the party, Liam and I went to Marie's house. I had printed the final guest list, arranged for a ride to pick her up, and even prepared a little slideshow with old family photos to play during dessert. It was going to be beautiful. I imagined her walking into the candlelit room, surrounded by friends and family, surprised and glowing. I wore a soft cream dress that night, something I knew she liked on me. I had even curled my hair. I didn't want to just be the planner. I wanted to be part of the family she was celebrating with. When we arrived, her kids were already there. Kara, Chloe, and Caleb, lounging on the sofa as they lived there. They looked up as we entered, and I swear I saw something flicker across their faces. Not confusion, not curiosity, smugness. We sat down. Liam tried to make conversation, and Marie gave her usual lukewarm responses. After a few awkward minutes, I took a deep breath and said, "So, we're really excited for tomorrow. I've got a little surprise planned." Marie raised an eyebrow. "Surprise?" I smiled. "Yeah, a dinner at Le Jardin, just family and close friends. Your favorite food, your favorite flowers. It's all taken care of." She blinked. "You planned this?" I nodded. "Yes, I wanted to do something special for you." There was a pause, a long one. Then she turned to Liam and said, "That's very thoughtful of you." Liam shook his head gently. "It wasn't me, she did it all." I smiled, expecting, hoping that this would finally be the moment she saw me. But her face changed. Her lips tightened, her eyes hardened, and then, in the most falsely sweet tone I've ever heard, she said, "Huh, that's lovely, dear, but I'm afraid I won't be coming." The words didn't land at first. "What?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I appreciate the effort," she said, "but I want something more intimate, family only. I've invited a few people here tomorrow, just the four of us and a couple of close friends." "But I invited people," I said. "Friends, relatives, people you care about." "Yes, and that's very sweet," she said as if I were a child who had drawn her a crooked picture. "But I don't consider you family, so it wouldn't feel right." Silence. Chloe and Kara looked at each other and tried to stifle a laugh. Caleb let out a low whistle and muttered, "Damn." I stared at Marie. "You don't consider me family?" I repeated. She gave a condescending smile. "It's nothing personal. You're Liam's wife, yes, but that doesn't automatically make you part of my family." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I planned everything," I whispered. "I paid for everything. You didn't lift a finger." "Well, nobody asked you to," Kara said, shrugging. I stood up slowly. My hands were trembling. "You know what?" I said. "Forget it. Party's canceled." Marie blinked. "You're not going," I said. "No one is. I'm uninviting everyone, and if you show up at that venue tomorrow, I'll have security escort you out." Chloe gasped. "You're kidding." "Try me." "You're being cold and cruel," Mari said sharply, dropping the sweet act. "After all I've put up with." All you've put up with? I laughed. You've never accepted me. You've never tried. You've used Leah, ignored me, and now you want to play the victim because I won't let you walk all over me on the night I paid for? Her mouth opened, but no words came. I did this to bring us together, I said, but you made it clear I was never part of the us to begin with. Liam stood up beside me, quiet but firm. His face was pale, but his hand found mine. Let's go. He turned and walked out. In the car, I tried to cancel the restaurant, but it was too late. We were past the deadline and the deposit was non-refundable. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling numb. Liam was silent the whole ride home. Back in our apartment, he said, "You didn't deserve that." And then he went outside for a cigarette. I just stood there in my cream dress and curled hair, wondering when I'd become this woman, begging for a seat at a table that was never set for me. Later that night, I texted every guest and told them the party was off. A few replied with concern, some with annoyance, a few with silence. I didn't care. Then I opened a new group chat. My friends, the ones who had never made me feel like an outsider. Change of plans, I wrote. We're having a party tomorrow. Dress cute, bring wine. And just like that, I flipped the script. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I had things to do, but because I couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. Liam was still asleep, his face turned toward the window, the lines between his brows deepening even in rest. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I'd imagined this day so differently. Today was supposed to be full of laughter, hugs, and toasts. I was supposed to be arranging centerpieces and greeting guests, sneaking a nervous glance at Marie as she walked in and maybe, just maybe, smiled like she meant it. Instead, there was nothing. Just me, a few unopened text messages from guests asking, "Are you sure it's canceled?" And a pit in my stomach so deep it felt like I might never fill it again. Dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, standing under the hot water until my skin turned pink. I didn't cry, I wanted to. I thought that might help, but nothing came out. Around noon, I sat at the kitchen table, hair still damp, wearing Liam's oversized hoodie. My phone buzzed. One of Marie's friends had replied, "Very disappointing, but I understand. Hope she's okay." That's when I realized what I'd done. I hadn't just canceled the party, I'd created a rift that couldn't be undone. Whatever anyone had thought of me before, they now had confirmation. The cold-hearted daughter-in-law who ruined her mother-in-law's birthday. The guilt started to creep in. Maybe I should have handled it differently, been more composed, more forgiving. Maybe Marie was right. I wasn't family. I'd forced myself into a space that didn't belong to me. And now I'd made it worse. Not just for me, but for Liam too. That hit hardest. Liam came into the kitchen, still groggy, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" I nodded. Too quickly. He poured coffee, sat across from me, and said nothing. He never pushed, never demanded explanations. But I knew he was hurting too. "They're gonna hate me forever now," I whispered. "They already did," he said gently. "You just stopped pretending they didn't." We sat in silence. Later that afternoon, my friends started showing up one by one. I'd told them to come, but part of me expected them to flake. Who wants to attend a party thrown out of spite? But they came. They brought wine, takeout, and card games. They hugged me. They made dumb jokes. Liam's best friend brought a speaker and started playing music. Someone lit candles. Another one pulled the cake out of the fridge. It was supposed to be for Marie, but now it was just cake. And slowly, the heaviness started to lift. We moved the furniture aside and danced barefoot in the living room. Someone spilled red wine on the rug and screamed. I laughed until my sides hurt. Took a picture with Liam holding a plastic cup, me still in that oversized hoodie, and posted it with the caption, "Not the night we planned, but the one we needed." Of course, it didn't take long. A few hours later, Chloe messaged me. "Wow, real classy, using her birthday to throw yourself a party?" Then Kara added, "You're unbelievable." Didn't respond. Liam read the messages over my shoulder and said, "Block them." I didn't. Not yet. Because despite everything, I still felt that familiar ache, that desperate, stupid part of me that wanted their approval. Not for me, but for him. After everyone left and the apartment went quiet again, I sat on the balcony alone. Liam joined me a few minutes later, bringing 2 mugs of tea. He sat next to me and said, "You did the right thing." Did I? He didn't answer immediately. "I told you not to plan that party. I knew what would happen, but you did it anyway. Because you believe in people. That's not a weakness. That's just you." I turned to him. "What if I made everything worse?" "You didn't," he said. "They did, and it's about time they dealt with that." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I looked out at the city lights, my heart ached in places I didn't know could hurt. I wasn't sad about the party or even the money. I was grieving the version of myself that still believed I could fix things, that I could be the kind of woman who turns a cold mother-in-law warm, who wins over icy sisters, who becomes part of a messy, complicated, beautiful family. I was grieving that hope, but somewhere deep down, a different kind of hope flickered. Maybe I didn't need to be accepted to be whole. Maybe losing their approval wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. Maybe this was the start of something I hadn't dared imagine yet. A life where I stopped chasing love from people who never planned to give it. The next few days were strangely quiet. No calls from Marie, no texts from the twins, just silence, thick, uneasy, loaded. I expected it to hurt. I thought I'd feel anxious, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Instead, I felt lighter. It was like walking out of a room where the lights had been flickering for years. Annoying, disorienting, but I'd gotten so used to it that I didn't even realize how tense it had made me. Now, with the buzzing gone, my shoulders finally dropped. Still, something didn't sit right. Liam had been calm, supportive even, but there was a distance in his eyes, like he was watching the fallout from far away, behind a thick pane of glass. One night, I pressed him. We were lying in bed, and I turned toward him, studying the shape of his face in the dark. "You haven't really said much," I whispered. He sighed. "What's there to say?" "About them, about all of it." There was a long pause. Then he said, "You know what's funny? I used to think my mom was the strongest woman I knew." I stayed quiet. When Dad died, everything collapsed. She'd never worked, didn't know how to pay bills, how to drive, how to even cook anything more than meatloaf. I thought we'd lose everything. "You held it together," I said softly. He laughed, bitter. "Barely. I worked 3 jobs, used what little money Dad left to float the rent and get Caleb through school. Marie cried a lot back then, said she didn't know how to survive. So I survived for her." I reached for his hand under the covers. "She started relying on me for everything," he continued, "and not just her. Chloe wanted money for clothes. Kara needed help moving. Caleb, God, he didn't even try. I kept thinking it was temporary, that I just had to hold the line long enough for them to find their feet. But they never did," I whispered. "They never even tried." His voice cracked. I'd never seen Liam like this. Raw, exposed. I realized then how much he'd hidden from me, how hard he'd worked to keep me from seeing the ugliest parts of the people he still called family. "She didn't want me to get married," he said. "Any time I got serious with someone, she'd start acting weird, distant, cold, told me I was drifting, that I didn't care about the family anymore." My heart sank. "They didn't hate you because of who you were," he said, turning to face me. "They hated you because you represented freedom. If I had a wife, a life of my own, they knew I wouldn't be theirs anymore." I wanted to cry, not for me, but for him. "How did you hold all that in?" He smiled weakly. "You loved them so much, I didn't want to ruin it for you." That broke me. I had spent years trying to earn love from people who saw me as a threat, who never planned to accept me, not because of my flaws, but because of what I meant to Liam: independence, distance, change. And Liam, he bore the cost of all of it. I kissed his cheek, and for the first time in a long time, he looked at peace. The next morning, I made a decision. No more shrinking, no more apologizing for taking up space in my own marriage. No more begging to be loved by people who would only love me on conditions I'd never meet. I started small. I unfollowed Chloe, Kara, and Caleb on social media. Then I deleted their numbers. I didn't send a dramatic message. I just disconnected. Then I sat down with Liam and said, I think it's time we stop pretending this is fixable. He nodded, been thinking the same. We drafted a short, respectful message and sent it to Marie. We're taking space for our emotional health. Please respect that. She didn't respond. That weekend, we went hiking, just the two of us, no phones, no emails, just air, trees, and the sound of our own footsteps. Halfway up the trail, Liam stopped and looked at me. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on me. I laughed, breathless. You're the easiest part of all this. It wasn't a dramatic rebirth. There were no fireworks, no big speeches, just a slow, steady reclaiming of peace, a quiet rebuild. I started journaling again, reading more, spending time with people who made me feel safe. Liam picked up his guitar for the first time in years. We cooked more meals together, walked after dinner, made plans for a trip we'd always postponed because something came up. It wasn't perfect. The shadows of everything still lingered, but we were choosing each other again every day, and that was enough. It started with a knock on the door, not a soft one, a hard, urgent pounding, the kind that announces drama even before it steps into the room. Liam and I were curled up on the couch with coffee, thinking we'd finally get a quiet Saturday. No such luck. When he opened the door, there she was, Marie. Her face was tight, makeup perfect, expression stormy. Behind her, like a trio of backup dancers, stood Chloe, Kara, and Caleb. All of them were glaring. We need to talk, she said, already stepping forward. No, we don't, Liam said, blocking the entrance. But she pushed past him like she still owned the right. I stood, excuse me? Marie looked at me with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. This is a family matter. I'm his wife, I said. This is our home. That makes it my matter too. Marie didn't even blink. It's not your place to speak on things you'll never understand. I walked closer, calm but firm. You mean loyalty, sacrifice, respect? Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't understand your version of those. She scoffed and looked around our apartment like she was inspecting a hotel room she didn't request. What a shame, she muttered. All this, built on lies and manipulation. Liam stepped between us. Enough. But Kara rolled her eyes. Don't act like you don't know this is her fault. Her fault? I asked. You mean the part where I threw a birthday party that none of you helped plan, only to be uninvited because I wasn't family? Chloe chimed in, arms folded. You hijacked Mom's birthday. No, I said, my voice low and steady. I paid for it, organized it, invited her friends, chose her favorite dishes, decorated with her late husband's favorite flowers. The only thing I didn't do was force her to show up. Marie's jaw clenched. You don't belong in our family. I nodded slowly. You've made that clear. But you had no problem cashing in on my husband's success, did you? Caleb muttered, he owes us after everything Mom did. And that finally was Liam's breaking point. I owe you, he said, his voice trembling not with fear but fury. You mean for the years I worked 2 jobs so you could buy Chloe a car she crashed in 6 months? For the tuition I paid while you skipped classes, Caleb? Or maybe the countless rent checks I wrote while Kara figured things out? They all fell silent. You're not my family, Liam said. You're a drain, a constant, exhausting black hole that only knows how to take. Marie reached for his hand, eyes suddenly glassy. Sweet. He pulled back. No. I spent years trying to earn love from people who only see me as a bank account. And she, he pointed to me, is the only person who ever asked if I was okay. You changed, Marie whispered. I grew up, Abasti, he replied. Chloe laughed bitterly. Oh, please. Do you think she loves you? She saw a paycheck. I looked her dead in the eye, and you saw an allowance. Difference is I work for mine. Kara's face twisted. You're tearing him away from his blood. He's bleeding, I snapped, and all of you just keep asking for more. Marie's voice rose again, desperate now. We're all he has. No, Liam said, she's all I need. The silence that followed was deafening. Marie tried once more, this time with trembling lips. Your father would be ashamed of what you're doing. Liam's eyes darkened. Don't. You dare. His voice was quiet, lethal. You used his death as leverage for years, said I had to step up and be the man. I did. And instead of being proud, you used me like a tool. You never once asked how I was doing. You just kept asking for more. I reached for his hand. He squeezed mine. You all need to leave, I said. Now. Marie looked like she wanted to scream, but bit it back. She turned to Liam one last time. You'll regret this. No, he said. I regret waiting this long. And just like that, they left, one by one, muttering, scoffing, slamming the door behind them. The silence afterward felt like exhaling for the first time in years. Liam turned to me, eyes wet. I didn't know I had that in me. I smiled. You always did, you just needed to see it. We hugged, we cried, we sat on the floor of our living room and let the dust of years finally settle. But of course, Marie wasn't done. 3 days later, she showed up again, alone this time. No words, just a grocery bag and an envelope. I thought you might still like the lemon pie, she said, not looking at me. And this is a letter. You don't have to read it or respond. I didn't say anything. When she left, I opened the envelope. 4 pages. Long, rambling, drenched in denial and deflection. But somewhere in the middle, a sentence stood out. Maybe I never wanted to share my son, but that was never your fault. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer. Maybe it was the beginning of change. Maybe not. Later that night, Liam sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't said much since the visit. I sat beside him and waited, giving him space. I used to think I was strong, he said finally, but maybe I was just numb. You were surviving, I said. There's a difference. He nodded, lips tight. They always made me feel guilty for wanting anything for myself, like I was betraying them just by dreaming. They didn't just take from you, I said. They trained you to believe that love was something you earned by giving until you broke. He let out a bitter laugh, and I bought it. You outgrew it, I corrected. That takes more courage than most people will ever know. For a while, we sat in silence. Then he turned to me. Do you think they'll ever stop? I didn't lie. No, but we'll be ready. And we were. Over the next few days, we blocked every number, changed locks, and spoke to a lawyer just in case things escalated. Marie sent one more letter, this time more bitter than apologetic. We didn't open it. Weeks passed. Something shifted in Liam. He stood taller, laughed louder. He started waking up before me to make coffee, humming to himself in the kitchen. One morning, I found him flipping through an old photo album. This used to be my favorite, he said, pointing at a picture of him and his dad fishing. I can see why. He used to say love makes you better, not smaller. I forgot that for a while. I leaned into him. You remembered just in time. And that's the thing no one tells you about letting go of a toxic family. The silence they leave behind, it's not empty. It's peaceful. It's space to breathe, to grow, to build something better. Not out of guilt, but out of love. The letter should have been the end of it. But toxic people rarely go quietly. A week after Marie's solo visit, a knock came again. This time, it wasn't Marie. It was a courier, delivering a legal notice. Liam stared at the envelope, his hands trembling as he opened it. They were suing him. The accusation? That he had stolen inheritance funds meant for all the siblings after their father's death. Marie claimed he had manipulated the family finances, taken more than his share, and used it to build his company. I remember sitting across from him as he read, the color draining from his face. "This is insane," he said, voice shaking. "That money was split evenly. I used mine to survive. They blew theirs in 2 years." I believed him, of course. I'd seen the receipts, the years of tax documents, the bank records. He hadn't taken a dime more than what was his. But that didn't stop the gossip from spreading. They'd gone public. Chloe had shared a vague post online, something about being betrayed by family. Kara and Caleb followed suit. It wasn't long before people were speculating, especially those tied to Liam's business. Investors asked questions, clients hesitated. The whisper network was loud. I hired a lawyer immediately. What followed were the most exhausting 3 weeks of my life. Depositions, document reviews, statements. Our lawyer was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rita, who saw through the case in 5 minutes. "They're hoping you'll settle," she said. "They don't want the truth, they want your money." Liam didn't waver. "I'd rather burn every check I ever wrote them than give them another cent." I stood beside him through it all, making spreadsheets, scanning documents, sitting beside him in meetings as he fought to clear his name. And we won. Not just won, destroyed them. Our lawyer presented evidence so airtight it shut the case down before it saw court. Every cent Liam used was accounted for. Every claim they made was debunked. Quickly, clearly, and embarrassingly. The judge dismissed the suit and fined Marie and her kids for defamation and legal fees. It should have felt like a victory. But Liam didn't smile. "They tried to ruin me," he whispered that night. "They tried to destroy everything I built. And they didn't care if I went down, as long as I didn't stand taller than them." I nodded. "They don't hate you, they envy you, and now they're choking on the life you refuse to let them take." Word spread quickly. The family's lies unraveled. Marie's siblings, Liam's aunts and uncles turned on her when they learned the truth. No one wanted to be associated with people who sued their own over fiction. Chloe lost a brand partnership after the mess went viral. Caleb's temp agency dropped him. Kara, who was in the middle of trying to get a loan for a boutique, was rejected. Suddenly, they were calling again. Apologies, justifications. Marie even cried in a voicemail saying she missed Liam's laugh. He didn't respond. One night, we sat on the balcony, staring out over the city. "They're finally facing consequences," I said. Liam nodded quietly. Then, "Is it bad that I don't feel happy about it?" "No," I said, "it's not happiness. It's a relief and maybe grief, too, for the family you hoped they could be." He looked over at me. "Thank you for not letting them break me." "They never could," I said. "You just forgot you didn't owe them your soul." And we stayed like that for a while. Two people who had clawed their way out of manipulation and called it love, who had survived family with knives behind smiles, who chose peace no matter the cost. It was finally ours. But that wasn't quite the end. A few days later, we got one final delivery, a handwritten letter from Marie. No courier this time, just stuffed in our mailbox. Liam almost threw it away, unread, but I stopped him. Might be worth seeing how far the delusion goes. He read it in silence, then handed it to me. The letter was long, meandering, defensive. She claimed everything had been a misunderstanding, that lawyers had twisted things, and that she only wanted to be reunited as a family. But the final line stood out like a sharp blade. "You may have won the legal battle, but we will always be your blood." It wasn't remorse, it was a warning. Liam folded the letter and threw it into the fireplace. "She still thinks she has leverage," he said. "She doesn't," I replied. He didn't respond. Not with words, not with emotion, total silence. That silence became our greatest power. Marie and her kids were left to deal with the consequences they had set in motion. Chloe's influencer career dried up. Caleb was evicted from his shared apartment. Kara moved back in with Marie, three bitter adults trapped in a house full of resentment and unpaid bills. Meanwhile, Liam's business bounced back. Investors returned, clients voiced their support. Even more surprising, his extended family reached out. Cousins he hadn't spoken to in years sent messages of encouragement. His uncle called just to say, "Proud of you for standing up." That meant more than I think Liam could admit. One night, a package arrived. Inside was a photo album Liam hadn't seen since childhood. It came with a note from his aunt. "Found this while cleaning out the attic, thought it might remind you who you really are." We sat together flipping through pages of birthdays, fishing trips and holidays, faces full of joy. A family that once existed before greed poisoned the roots. Liam paused on one photo. He and his dad on a picnic blanket, laughing over a spilled juice box. "He'd be proud," I said softly. Liam nodded, eyes misty. "I finally feel like I can breathe." And that was the real victory. Not a legal win, not the public vindication, but this moment of peace, free from manipulation, free from debt, emotional and financial. A clean break, a fresh start. And as we looked ahead, we promised ourselves this. We would never let pain disguise itself as love again. We would build a new family, one that chose each other every day. Not out of obligation, but out of truth, out of love. It's strange how peace feels when it finally arrives. Not loud, not triumphant, just quiet. A stillness we hadn't known in years settled over our lives, the kind where we could finally leave our phones unattended, where doorbells no longer triggered dread, where silence didn't mean the next storm was brewing. One evening, months after the lawsuit, Liam and I walked through the park near our home. It was chilly, leaves crunching under our boots. He held my hand tighter than usual. "Think I'm finally okay," he said. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. And I believed him. We stopped at a bench and watched a little boy chase after his dad, giggling, his tiny legs struggling to keep up. "I want to give that to someone someday," Liam said. "A childhood without manipulation, without guilt." "We will," I said, "and they'll know what real love feels like." He looked at me, something soft and certain in his eyes. "I used to think blood was everything," he said. "That family was something you couldn't walk away from, no matter how badly they hurt you." And now, he smiled. "Now I know family is who shows up when you're hurting, who stands with you, not on you." That became our new foundation. We started small, hosting friends for dinner, reaching out to old ones. We let people in carefully, intentionally. We built a life not based on obligation, but on mutual choice. And we learned that forgiveness isn't about pretending something didn't happen, it's choosing not to carry it forever. That love can exist outside of bloodlines. That peace isn't something handed to you, it's built, defended, and earned. And the most important lesson? You can love someone deeply and still walk away when they become poisonous. You're not weak for leaving, you're strong for choosing yourself. I don't know if Marie will ever change. I doubt it. Her silence has stretched for months now, and I suspect it will remain that way. But I've made peace with that too. Because of this life, the one we've built from the ashes of manipulation and guilt, it's ours. Intario. And if I could go back to that moment planning her birthday, hoping to win her over, I wouldn't stop myself. Because it showed me everything I needed to know. It showed me who she really was and who my husband could become. This isn't a story about revenge. I think it's a story about clarity, about loving someone enough to say, you deserve better than the weight they make you carry, and then standing beside them as they finally put it down. For good. Later that week, I found Liam in the garage, dusting off his old guitar. It had been years since he played. Music was something he used to love, but somewhere between the weight of expectations and the noise of manipulation, he'd forgotten what joy sounded like. He strummed a few chords, Hesitant at first, then slowly, confidently, I stood by the door and watched, quietly overwhelmed. He looked up and smiled. I'm remembering who I was before all the noise. That hit me hard, because I was too. We started doing more of the things we loved, not for anyone else, but for ourselves. Cooking new recipes, hiking on weekends, reading together before bed, laughing more. And as the months rolled on, our home became more than just a safe place. It became a sanctuary. Friends came over and said they could feel the peace here, that it was warm, real. I took that as the highest compliment. One night, Liam and I sat on our porch, watching the stars. Do you ever miss them? I asked gently. He thought for a long time. I miss the version of them I used to imagine, he said, the family I hoped they could be. But I don't miss the pain that came with waiting for them to become that. I nodded. That's fair. He turned to me. Do you ever wish I had done something differently? Only that you'd walked away sooner, I said, but I understand why you didn't. We leaned into each other. No more words were needed. Healing isn't a moment. It's a series of choices made every day to protect your peace, to rewrite your story, to choose love that doesn't come with conditions. And we were finally living that truth. Months later, we took a short trip to the mountains, just the two of us. No reception, no noise, just wind, pine trees, and our thoughts. We hiked during the day and lit a fire at night. Somewhere between watching the stars and sharing hot cocoa, Liam turned to me and said, I used to be afraid of silence, now it feels like freedom. That night, we made plans, not for escape, but for the future. A real future. One where we could build a family not by blood, but by intention. One rooted in truth and mutual respect. We even talked about becoming mentors, volunteering at a local youth group to help kids dealing with toxic family dynamics, not as experts, but as people who survived it and came out stronger. Because if there's one thing we learned through all this, it's that sometimes your story becomes someone else's survival guide. We promised ourselves we'd keep telling the truth, that we'd never dim our light to make others more comfortable, that we'd keep creating a home where love didn't come with a price tag or silent strings, and maybe, just maybe, we'd inspire someone else to do the same. As I sit here writing this, Liam is in the kitchen making pancakes, his new weekend ritual. The dog's curled up at my feet. There's music playing, his playlist all old school, rock and blues. And I'm smiling. Not because everything's perfect, but because everything is finally real. And for us, that's more than enough.